break-ins. Years ago, there was a number of break-ins in the community, and we had a meeting here. There's one individual who was breaking into a lot of homes. He was actually caught climbing through my neighbor's window 2 houses down from my house. And that's the world we all live in, whether it's here, whether it's Princeton, whether it's Spring Lake, whether it's Mendham, whether it's Morris Township, Morris Plains, in any community. I personally, and I'm sure the police chief will back it up, we live in a very safe community. These things do happen, as tragic as this situation is, and how, at least personally, as a mayor, how we never ever want to hear things like this or witness things like this or be dealing with things like this, but it happened. And I'm going to preempt the police chief just so everyone knows that he is bound by not talking about certain information. So if you have come here to ask questions of different things that have to do with the event and the investigation, he's not going to be able to answer you. So we have lots to talk about, and that's kind of like preempted our business administrators here. I'd like to thank Councilwoman Allison Deeb, who's in the back, Councilman David Silva in the back. Any other elected officials here?
Bob is here.
Where's Bob?
Bob.
Hi, Bob. You're kind of blending in back there. I did see you when I walked in, and make sure you introduce the police chief.
Oh, sure.
So I'm just going to turn it over to the police chief just to give you, so he can introduce himself for those who don't know him. I think you all probably know him. And then we can start with some questions and answers.
Well, I'm going to stand up so you don't have to keep doing this, craning your head. It's kind of making me sick. One of my colleagues is here from Mount Olive, Steve Beecher. He's the Mount Olive police chief. And I don't assume that everybody knows me. I have been a part of Morristown all of my 59 years. Grew up on Dogwood Road. My brother bought my parents' house. I think most people know me as a very compassionate person with a lot of drive. If anybody in this room thinks that this situation bothers them more than me, they're simply wrong. This has had a profound effect on me. The only thing I can think that had a greater effect was when a 10-year-old boy was murdered, tortured, sexually assaulted, and murdered in Morristown. I was very close to that investigation. And I would tell you then as well, it was 18 days before we arrested that individual, and there was a lot of pressure to get information out. And it is very frustrating when you know things, but you also know that getting certain information out might jeopardize the investigation. It's very hard to keep tight-lipped. So I will tell you how I've come to operate, or my police department has come to operate. It's been 30 years in the making. It's been since my parents lived on Dogwood Road. I will tell you this, the mayor said it, this is a very, very safe town. If you've been here for any period of time, you know that this town has changed a lot. And maybe it wasn't considered to be such a safe town. And it's now considered to be a very, very safe town. So I will answer any questions about how we operate, when it comes to burglaries or any other kind of investigation. But again, I will not speak to that specific case, because that case may go to trial, and I don't want anything that I say here to affect that case. So the mayor's ready to answer all your questions.
So so we have a good amount of people. I really am very appreciative as many people has come out tonight. So I know just from when there's a lot of people, we'll just try to go from one side to the other. Any question that I can answer, I'll answer. Any question the police chief can answer, he will answer. And when we get done with the question, I think maybe then we can talk about steps moving forward, and some ideas that we have and some ideas that you may have for the community. So why don't we start, should have had a sheet.
Just raise your hand.
Just raise your hand and I'll start over this way, and if you just stand up and ask the question, and then we'll tag out.
What I gleaned from the conversation, the catalyst for this meeting was one incident that you don't want to discuss. Is that correct?
The catalyst for this
Well, the
meeting.
reason we're having this meeting
I would say that's a
There's
fair statement, that the catalyst for this meeting was that event, the sexual assault that's been reported.
One of the questions I have in terms of recent burglaries or other events, not this particular event.
Sure.
Are there sections of town where these things seem to occur more often than other sections?
No, and that gets to the way we operate, okay? We had 25 burglaries in 2017. There's no pattern. This particular set of events was no different. We run on the average of 2 a month. In fact, when Ridgedale Avenue was quote-unquote hit, that's our term, that was one event. That was the only burglary. When Hill Street was hit, that was only one of 2 burglaries. There was nothing that was unusual. And our biggest burglary month was actually in August when we had 3. And there's no pattern. They're all over town. And did we issue a press release on any of them? No. We in my business, we have clearance rates. The national clearance rate is 12.9%. Our clearance rate is 68%. So we take burglaries very seriously because in our mind and in anybody in law enforcement, it's an invasion. It's an invasion of your protected space. And we put a lot of resources and a lot of effort into solving burglaries. And we did in the case of 12 Hill Street, and we did in the case of Ridgedale Avenue, and we do in the case of all burglaries. That's a high priority crime for us.
There's a second part to my question.
Sure.
Is there a time of day or a day of the week where the homes are particularly vulnerable?
We do a lot of crime analysis. Daytime burglaries all over this county are a real problem because this is a working county. Everybody works and nobody's home. Most of our burglaries, yes, are during the daytime when nobody's home. And the one thing that's changed a lot is not only is nobody home, nobody's really watching so much like they used to do when my parents grew up.
So evenings are safer, or night times tend to be safer or less, there'll be fewer occurrences at night than there would be.
That's not something that I'm so much prepared for. I could say as a general statement, as far as burglaries, we have more daytime burglaries. But we do have night burglaries. It could be 13 and 12 or 14, and 11, something like that. We definitely have nighttime burglaries. Where do we have nighttime burglaries? Businesses, because businesses are closed. So daytime burglaries generally are residents, and nighttime burglaries are generally business. That's just simple logic.
If you permit me, one final question.
Sure.
Back in 1980, as a matter of fact, 1980, an ordinance was passed. I'll cite the ordinance number 021-80. And what the council had manifest or did at that time for the ordinance was to have the fire bureau and police bureau establish a console into which automatic dialing on alarms could be transmitted with voice messaging to that console. And I participated in that for many years. I've never had a burglary, so I've never confirmed that it's still operational. And I wanted reassurance that that ordinance, since it was passed by the council, duly passed in 1980, that service is still available to the public.
Never heard of that ordinance. Not aware of it. I believe that there's been some technology developed since 1980 that we can utilize for notification. I mean, we've talked about Twitter and Facebook. I will tell you this, and one of the things that people know about me is I'm going to be honest. I don't know what it is about Morristown. I put out, and that's why Steve Beecher's here. I ask a lot of questions of my colleagues, what they do. And one of the things that is definitely lacking in Morristown, and it's not just because of the lack of effort on the part of the mayor and myself, is neighborhood watch. Morris Township, very active. We have one really active neighborhood watch, and that's the Burnham Park Association, and it's because they're very upset about cars parked on the grass at Burnham Park when the Little League has games. But as far as, and Ms. Deeb, I've been to your house a couple of times trying to get things going with neighborhood watch, and the thing that happens is there's a lot of energy in a room here, but it always seems to dissipate with time. And my hope and the mayor can back me up on this, we've never had a second meeting for any situation. Never. Never been called back. I want a second meeting. I want this energy that was created by this tragedy, I want this energy to continue. I want you to get to know your neighbors, to start a neighborhood watch, and to maintain this energy so that this doesn't happen again.
Well,
So,
As far as that
can I just
particular
follow up
thing,
with
I don't
that
know.
1 second,
Yes,
in
please.
case I get this right? So if your house has an alarm system on it,
with an automatic dial.
so I break a window and it's got an alarm tape on it, sets an alarm off, ADP alarm or something, it dials directly to the police. I think that's set up to 911.
I don't think we get alarms.
Yeah, I don't know if that's the case, I don't know about the ordinance.
If it's
Yeah,
not-
I'll look into it, but I think any alarm that you have, system you have in your house dials to a, like,
Service.
a service. Say it's,
No fucking way, no.
well, it may still exist, I don't know.
I know exactly what he's talking about, and I thought it was no fucking too, so I'm just shocked too.
Yeah, no, I think if you put a brand new alarm system in your home today,
But most of us, what he's talking about, most of us that are been around don't have brand new. Yes.
And older,
Yeah.
I know,
we'll look into it.
The ordinance hasn't been revoked.
Yeah.
You're obliged to have that service available. There's an ordinance that says this should be established,
Look,
duly passed by.
In 1980, I
Would you mind giving me a copy of that and I'll check into
Yeah,
it?
as a matter of fact, I brought a copy.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, okay,
Thanks,
thank
Dad.
you for your attention and your answers.
Thank you, sir.
All right, I'll give it to you right now. It's
Okay.
it's
Come on up.
right in chapter
You can
57.
stand up.
Hi, I'm Debbie Vereen. I
Hi,
just
Debbie.
wondered,
Debbie.
it seems like from what I've read, there's a lot of encouragement for people to lock their doors on both their cars and their homes. I was wondering if most of the incidents are because doors are unlocked, or has there been a lot of actual breaking of windows and forced entry?
Another frustrating thing, and the mayor can back me up on this, thefts from motor vehicles. 31 of them, when was that, back in June or July? Not one vehicle was locked. I get it, I get we all want to go back to 20, 25 years ago, and we don't want to have to lock our vehicles. My family, even when I go up to upstate New York, my kids call me the locking king, because they go out to the car trying to get an in or two, and the car is locked, and we're in upstate New York, and everybody's nice. It is very frustrating. The locks that we run into, they're easily compromised. The simplest thing of locking your car door. I'll give you an example from years ago, the frustration at the police department. Remember when GPSs were a big issue where they were getting stolen? And they were getting stolen out of the headquarters plaza garage at an alarming rate. So what do? We don't have any real undercover cars, so we rent a car. And we put a GPS in it, and we pull it into a space, and we have 2 detectives at their rate of pay doing a surveillance. And what happens? It happened to be a woman. She drives right up to to the spot right next to my detectives, leaves her GPS right on the dashboard, gets out, and goes into the headquarters plaza hotel, and doesn't lock her car. So I just wasted a lot of money on a surveillance. The simplest thing, we tell people back then, it was get anything of value out of sight, put in your glove compartment, and lock your car door. Same thing with your house. Every time you leave your house, even if it's for 10 minutes to walk your dog, you should be locking your house. And the other thing is, we have people that will come out and evaluate the security of your home. And you will find it's the weakest link theory. If you had, I can tell you this, I can get at any house in this town. When people call the police, when they get locked out of their houses, who do they call? They call the police. And you know what we do? We go around, we always find an unlocked window. That's all a burglar does. Find an unlocked window, or find a window that's easily compromised. So yeah, you can do things when you walk right out of here to make your home safer and to make yourself safer.
So
at the end, before we leave tonight, you make sure in the back you get this sheet of paper, which gives you a lot of tips on safety.
So unlike you, I'm the queen of locking my door, even if I go into the backyard, because at night, then I'll worry, did somebody
Right.
sneak in? But I guess what I'm kind of asking is it not as much of a concern? If I'm vigorously locking my doors and keeping things as tightly secured as I can, what is the likelihood, based upon what's happened prior, that that's going to be sufficient?
Our experience has been, look, burglars, it's a profession, and it's like anything that you do in your profession. You want ease of operation. You don't want intense labor. So the burglar is going to look for the easiest place to get into. If you're locking your doors well and you have the best locks, where's the burglar going to go? Next door. That's crime prevention 101.
Thanks.
Well, since Linda jumped up,
Yes, well, I'm sorry, I arrived late, you may have already covered this, but my question concerns the selective dissemination of information. The day after this incident on Elm Street, my phone rang early in the morning, a neighbor called and said, I've just heard third hand, you need to lock your doors. I said, you need to give me more information. She said, I can't jeopardize my source. So here, it's nice that I'm told to lock my doors. I don't know why, except that the day before I happened to drive past on Elm Street and see the scene, so I knew something was up. So the question is, information does leak out, and how can that be disseminated to a wider audience?
before I let the chiefs address that, I can tell you I got a call from the newspaper, and I was on the phone with the newspaper on South Street, right? And the newspaper saying, Mayor, so can you tell me what you know and what took place? I said, well, I did speak to the police chief, and he's under, he can't speak. I need to call he tells me I need to call the prosecutor's office. So the newspaper person says, why? I have all the information. So, but I still follow what the law says I have to follow, which is called the Morris County Prosecutor's Office. Now, I think what Linda's saying is, afterwards, why weren't we out in the paper saying blah, X, Y, Z?
This was at 8 a.m. on Friday morning, so
Okay, just gonna address it.
there wasn't any information.
Like from the president's office on down, there are leaks. But just because there's a leak, that doesn't mean that I am going to break, my silence when by the way, it's not just for the mayor, there might be for some ramifications. If once the prosecutor's office is called in, if I give out information without the prosecutor's authority, he is the chief law enforcement officer in the county and my boss, and I can be charged criminally. The prosecutor's office, rightfully so, is concerned about the case, bringing it to trial, and getting a conviction. And it's John McNamara that has often said, his mantra is, we are not going to try this in the papers. If we think there's truly a public safety issue, we will put out an alert. But at that point, we made an arrest.
And that was the follow-up I was going to say, Linda. If the police department or the county prosecutor's office, let's say our police chief, called Jillian, our business administrator, and myself on a conference call and said, look, there's a public risk here. We need to get everybody out into the streets. We need to put every Nixle we have, which is something we'll talk about at the end of this. Nixle, get it on Facebook, get it on our social media, get all the council members to disseminate to every email chain they have. That was not the case. I'm not saying that couldn't happen. And he's saying that's exactly what would have happened if that's what was the case that needed to happen.
Back up to November and December, when there were break-ins, and
Right.
still, we didn't hear about them.
And I will address that.
Yeah.
There was a break-in in November, and there was a break-in in December. And the policy and the practice, and you've been here for 30, 40 years, the policy and the practice of the Morristown Bureau of Police has been developed over that 30 years for a lot of different reasons. And if you want me to cite them, I will. I mean, it's been a long process, but I can tell you that very generally, the Morristown Bureau of Police is expected to do their job. They're expected to do their job quietly, and that's what we do. And I believe that I can always learn. I can always do it better. My legacy, Ms. Barrick asked me a couple of weeks ago what my legacy, I always want to make things better. If you want everything out, if you want Twitter, and you want me to notify you about every burglary, every theft, I can do that. But in general terms, and I've been here for 35 years on February 7th, and I know the history. In general terms, it has been. Morristown Bureau of Police, you're professionals, do your job, do it quietly, keep us safe.
I'll get to you in a minute, Karen.
Precisely how do you think notifying nearby neighbors to be careful because there was a violent crime in their proximity, how do you think that would bias an investigation? Because I just don't see that would impair any investigation. But while the police force is quietly doing their job, I'm oblivious to a potential threat that I might heighten my awareness about and better protect myself, which is what I'm looking for from the police department.
Well, I will go back to the abduction, sexual assault, torture, and murder of a 10-year-old boy, Walter Valenzuela, May 20th, 2001. The pressure put upon the police department to get information out, and I will tell you, as the captain of the division and being out in the community, I was the one saying to the chief and the prosecutor, you have to get more information out. And in that particular case, in this case, I respond to the directives of the chief law enforcement officer in the county, who has his reasons for doing or not doing certain things. But I know exactly how you feel, because as the captain of the division, with the murder of a 10-year-old boy and the fear that put in the community, I wanted more information out, whether or not they had a suspect. But I can speak about it now because the man's been convicted. There was a fear that that individual would get on a plane and go to Honduras if he knew that he was a person of interest or a suspect. And we would have lost that case. In those we have a hierarchical structure for a reason, because we cannot act by committee. In that particular case, it's the Morris County Prosecutor's Office. In this particular case, it's no secret. The Morris County Prosecutor's Office, once you have a serious matter, the Morris County Prosecutor's Office takes over. And we follow orders. And the order is, no information comes out from the Morristown Bureau of Police. It's that simple. Until they do a press release.
Since I didn't get details, can you tell me the time between this incident and the time of the arrest you refer to? I mean, what was the period of time that neighbors were unaware that there was a...
Well, I think that was reported in the paper. The arrest was made the next day.
The recent arrest or the Walter, the killing of the 10?
The recent incident.
That was reported in the paper. That arrest was made the next day. So it was about 36 hours.
Okay, Karen.
Several years ago, I can't remember how many, time flies by, we had another incident where a guy was running around town burglarizing everything, and it took forever to get the town together, and you actually knew who he was, you just couldn't catch him. But see, if some of us had known...
We actually talked about that when I first started. We had a meeting in here with a lot of residents, because Oliphant and Jardine was an area that was hit. And we had all the residents, and actually some of the residents were telling the police chief, I think we know who it is. They were in the meeting, and we did canvass the neighborhoods, because even our neighborhood where he was caught was canvassed. So we did have a public open meeting for people to come in and a session about locking your windows, locking your doors. See somebody strange in your neighborhood, pick up the phone, call 911. If all those things were given out there and the public was noticed on this individual, and he finally was caught by Pat Flanagan.
Yeah, but it took forever.
Listen, I'm not a thief. I don't know how they operate. I know,
If we had been noticed earlier, he was doing this for several months.
we were noticed.
or over.
We weren't, the whole community was noticed. That's a different circumstance.
So,
Yeah.
is he still in jail?
I-
Well, he might be not
Victor?
doing it.
There's a victim notification process, so if someone goes to jail and they are released, the victims are notified.
I just want to follow up really quick on your comment, because I think we've talked about it a few times. When an attempted burglary happens, it's not, my phone's not ringing off the hook. Mayor, you have to put out a press release, go to every neighborhood in the whole community. There was an attempted break-in on 6 Ridgedale Avenue. So they dealt with that as police department. Then there was another one the next month, and they dealt with that. No one could have foreseen, at least on a non-police side like myself, that I'm not questioning their tactics or what they did, because obviously they arrested this person within a day and a half. And what I won't do is I won't Monday morning quarterback. I won't look and say, oh, what didn't we do? At the end of this, I think there's suggestions that we can take from the public and give to the public. There's lots of ways we can notice people. Through Nixle, through Facebook, through Twitter, through email chains that council people have, through my own newsletter. I wish everybody in this community, when we leave here tonight, that I can get a group of people out of this room to go to neighborhoods, especially your own neighborhoods, and get everybody to sign up for Nixle. It is such an easy way for the town to send you a quick message, and I think maybe that would help the process better. But I'm not defending, or I'm not going to, and I will defend the police chief if I have to. They did their job, and none of this could have been foreseen. I'm not going to speak as a police officer, but I know that apartment buildings were noticed, the managers of apartment buildings noticed their tenants. Police were in the area canvassing the neighborhoods where these break-ins were. So they did their policing. And it's tragic what happened, and I feel awful. And it's the terrible part of society that we experience, and this young woman experienced. And my thoughts and prayers are every day for her and her family. And I know how the police department and this police chief feels about it. And like I said, I'm not defending them, but they do their policing. And I think when you see a statistic that 12% nationwide is how they deal with burglaries on solving them, 68% in Morristown is a pretty big number for how safe our community is.
Morristown.